Good.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah. Whoa.
I understand that I'm following the great white father, Bobby Kennedy. I understand last night he told you a couple of things. Now I want to put some of them in perspective for you. When he said the world belongs to you, that comes from a great black man by the name of Frederick Douglass. He said the world belongs to the youth. Secondly, I understand that Bobby urged us to stand up and speak out against injustice. Well, we could tell him that we don't need anybody to tell us to stand up anymore. Not only are we going to stand up, we're going to right the wrongs of our people in this generation.
All right, it's This Week in Tyranny. We're going to skip everything. It doesn't matter what my name is. It doesn't matter what episode it is, what the day is. I have your attention. Thank you for that. And I'm going to try to inject some value and give you some valuable information. For this one, nuance is the name of the game. So, and it does matter that it's episode 96 because that's a number having to do with polarity. And then I was split about what to do the show about. Yeah, let's get into that. Quick synopsis, quick background. I'm going to talk about Hurricane Helene, which I called Helena last episode. Well, I'm going to talk about it. My friend brought to my attention Dane Winnington talking about the way geoengineering was involved in this recent sequence of events. And I have to admit, I kind of rolled my eyes a bit at that because in my areas of research, like my intellectual circle, so to speak, I run into geoengineering a lot. So we talk about this. Like, quick definition of geoengineering, okay, just a baseline. We're talking about government military operations using chemicals or electromagnetic frequency to change natural climate and weather patterns, natural patterns. So I run into that often. And I said to her, this is a waste of time though, because our greatest and our most immediate threat is not natural disaster, it's internal disaster. It's the minds of the people. We're destroying ourselves much faster. Our inability to think and feel properly, we're doing that at a much faster rate than we would ever destroy ourselves with engineering, with geoengineering. And after all, our planet, by the way, is reflecting to us our own inner state, right, through the weather. So these extreme weather events that we're seeing, they're really having to do much more so with nature itself than they have to do with man-made machines and chemicals. This is what I was saying. So this show was not going to be about geoengineering. It was going to be about a different topic that I had in mind. But I took a look at Dane Winnington's findings and the hurricane path, the reports, the news coverage, alternative and mainstream, and then that made me go back and look at some of the other geoengineering activities going on currently. And then after all that, I had to come back to my friend and say, all right, I was wrong on this one, okay? Geoengineering plays a way bigger part in all this, and it's even more of a serious issue than I ever gave credit for. Even though I mention it somewhat frequently, and I did an episode or two about it on this show, but it really should be closer to like 10 episodes with how important it is. So I'm going to try here to give you the best geoengineering deep dive of 2024 by someone who's not a specialized geoengineering researcher. Alright, I'm setting realistic goals here, okay? So that's what we're going to do. But just to wrap up my introduction here, I honestly thought earlier this week that it's a waste of time to talk about people destroying the environment, when at the same time, since the beginning of time, the problem has always been people destroying people, not people destroying the environment. But then I realized that I got caught in a dialectic. Like, it's not one or the other, it's both. Of course it's both. Like in biosemiotics, I introduced that in episode 93. The environment around you affects what you see and what you even can see, right? It does. But then also your individual narrative, your worldview, is going to change what kind of environment you can actually perceive. So it's both of these things having an effect. It's nature and nurture together. But society gets us to choose one or the other based on your feelings and which narrative speaks more to you. And honestly, I see this now. It spoke more to me to talk about the way the human mind works and affects the world, because in that narrative, all of the power is with the individual. But if I were to talk about geoengineering, well, that's not in my power to stop, right? So one individual can't change the world. So then it makes me feel like there's this group of people that have some sort of power that borders on supernatural. And I do not like the feeling of anybody having some kind of supernatural gifts or powers over me. I don't like that shit. So, yeah, there's that. But the reality is that these geoengineering measures are being taken and they're effective as hell. So that's the point of me doing this long ass intro, to use myself as an example of the errors that everyone makes in their daily perception and their functional worldview. We all do that. And that is just like political parties. People develop affiliations based on where they see themselves fitting in, based on the narrative they're working with. Kind of like with political parties, it's tradition versus progress, diversity versus unity. And with me, just now, with psychological warfare versus environmental warfare. And I just really hate the narrative where somebody's like a god above me and they can do all these incredible things that I can't do. That's really what it comes down to, and it's all about feeling. We get exploited, we get fooled, and we get robbed in this world, all because of our fucking emotions. By the way, I didn't give the disclaimer, like I'm gonna rant a little bit this episode, but it's all very informative, right? So again, I'm not splitting up my reason from my emotions. I'm pretty fucking angry about geoengineering, and I'm also gonna break that shit down with scientific precision, okay? But it all has to do with emotions. Most people can't even understand like my normal basic thoughts, everyday thoughts, because somewhere along the line it hits a nerve. And I know you guys listening to me, you've seen that. You can't connect with people. Something you say is just going to hit a nerve with them, and you can't explain even the most basic things about how the world works. It's some kind of fragility or sensitivity that other people don't disturb, but we do, you know? It sets off some sort of defensive or repression reaction. And then they actually think that it's their own mental faculties that are directing the words coming out of their mouth. It isn't. They don't realize it's essentially a fucking temper tantrum. The world is full of foot stompers, like passive-aggressive, grown-ass children, and they take themselves very seriously. Every opinion of theirs is a very serious deal. Everything is serious, actually, except for serious self-reflection, to dig up the most painful things in you and get them the fuck out of there. That's what we need to do. People talk about being humble. I think that's the humility that people are missing, to really be humble about the way they've been bullshitting themselves. When you feel frustrated or angry and upset, it's time to shut the fuck up and start digging. There's a problem on the inside. Sure, if somebody does you wrong, then that is a real anger felt against them. But almost every time, on at least an equal level, there's a equal corresponding problem internally that should be processed. Like, for real, start digging, or make a video, take your emotions out publicly. If the problem is something like geoengineering, which is not my problem, it's the problem of these people doing it. Take your emotions out publicly, indiscriminately, through productive work or through art. I consider this show to be both of those, so I'm gonna do both. I'm doing both topics. The one I wanted to do originally, and I'm gonna talk about geoengineering. Really, it's like 80% geoengineering. But, so let's talk about it. I really wanted to talk about the U.S. dock workers strike. On October 1st, the International Longshoremen's Association, which is the union that represents all the dock workers at the ports on all of the East Coast and Gulf Coast, they went on strike. All water shipments to the United States that do not come from the West Coast, they went on strike Tuesday this past week. This union, they want a 50% pay increase over the course of several years. And the main thing is that they want a complete ban on automation, and it's really the automation that is the only issue, because the West Coast Port Workers Union, they already reached a deal with the ports. They got their raise, but of course they did not pursue a ban on machines at the docks, because that's an impossible, groundless thing to ask for, and I'm going to talk about why. But it's not a useless thing to do, because they do have the plausible leverage, at least, to make this strike even justifiable, right? They're not going to laugh in their face, because if they stop working, then that's a big problem. You're not getting any water shipments, right? Not all of the supply chain is through water, but something like that is going to have a huge effect. I mean, it's crazy. But that's the whole point of this strike, actually. It's not really about the raise. It's not about the job security. It's about manipulating the market and injecting more insecurity, more distrust, and more fear into the free market. It's about planting the seeds where in the future, Americans no longer live comfortably, but they have to worry about the availability of resources that we need for basic needs, right? So that is the main goal here, main objective. And when you have to concern yourself with mere survival, just subsistence, then you're concerned with that, and you can't concern yourself with rights, especially complicated rights like privacy, free speech, free exchange of information, about values and ideas, which are the building blocks of civilization. And I heard this guy...
The farmers that need to reach the export market, they're telling me that they're going to hurt through all of this.
Now you start to realize who the longshoremen are, right?
Nobody cares.
People never gave a about us until now, when they finally realized that the chain is being broke now. Cars won't come in. Food won't come in. Clothing won't come in. You know how many people depend on our jobs? Half the world.
Really why I wanted to touch on this, because I heard the president of this workers union. He's all over TV and the internet. He's talking boldly, and you know what? It is an emotional thing for me. Harold Daggett, this guy, if there's any type of person I hate, it's this type of person. It's not Harari, it's not Bill Gates, it's not King Charles or Klaus Schwab or the president of the World Bank or anybody like that. Those people, to me, they are who they are, and they look just as slithery as they act. But this guy is a fucking puppet. He's big talking. He seems to fit the role of a hard-nosed, tough working man. He isn't. This is a soft-handed bureaucrat. He acts like a fucking tough guy. He talks like he's blue-collar. But this is not a dock worker. This is a bureaucrat. He's a daddy's boy, and his daddy was a daddy's boy. He's a third-generation dock worker, allegedly. But what he really does is he collects a six-figure salary, shaking hands, and selling away the products of his workers' labor behind closed doors. Now, those allegations, I don't have empirical proof of them. It is a personal attack, but it's based on how these mobster persona union boss types operate. They're so true to their stereotype. Their pseudo-masculine shell is like a mask that's concealing their true identity from the men that are like the horses that are pulling their wagon. And the way I see it, if a guy like that who claims to be like a real man, if somebody makes allegations like that against you, then you should address them, because either it's slander and you want to handle it like that, or it's a fight. And either way, I'm there anywhere you want to take it, Harold. And I know it's a bit theatrical and all, like, well, I'm calling him out to a fight, like he's likely never going to see this. I get it, and he's playing a role anyway. I get it. But I've seen crazy things happen in my life, and I'm so serious about this. This false tough guy image, this is the epitome of my like enemy in this world. Joseph Stalin was like this, just like this type of guy, and you can see that in him. I would tear this boy to shreds. He may be bigger than me, but he doesn't have the fighting spirit. That is obvious. You could just look at him. And I'm real nasty up close, and I work on tempering my body. So like a guy like this grabs me, he's gonna start like losing chunks of skin. He's gonna start having to deal with like fingers in his eyes. And I know that's not how fights actually go in real life. I've been in a few fights. I've loved every second of them. But now that I live a different lifestyle, Next time I come across somebody who's responsible for people suffering in the world, it's not a fight. I'm gonna get you out of there as soon as possible. They're gonna have to come pick his ass up like roadkill. They're gonna have to come pick your ass up, like shovel you off the fucking pavement. That's how I feel about people like that, and I'm serious about that. I'll do it. I cannot wait. But let's get to the strike, though. Let's get to the strike. Okay, more unpopular opinions, right? I don't agree with workers' unions in principle. Like, trade unions are a socialist concept. I agree with a strike in principle, but a strike should consist of the few of the most valuable and pivotal in a group, like Atlas Shrugged. Like Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. That is a strike. A workers' union, they fight for a minimum provision guaranteed to the lowest of its members. And before I start with this even, do I have anything against the common man, the worker at the bottom? Obviously not. That's who I am. I came from the bottom when it comes to the workforce in America. I remember I was in my 20s already, and I was making like $10 or $12 at a temp agency. So I understand the predicament of a laborer seeing the injustice of the economic system, but I've also come to understand that it's not the big boss man at the top holding you down. It's the people around you keeping you tied down to them. That's who's holding you down. And they're the ones who do all the talking while you do all the work. That's how it goes. And I love the idea of a strike. People do need to speak up. Yeah, it should be done by the people who actually do the fucking work. But in practice, unfortunately, the ones who do all the work, they throw their lot in with the ones who just come along for the ride and just come to hang out and hang on. And I've seen it. So, but do the more talented and productive workers enjoy the benefits of a strike? Right? Of course they do. They get the $5 raise too. But their raise is coming out of a total that the employer mentally has already allotted for all the workers. They already have an amount that they're going to dedicate to payroll. So if you and the lowest worker both get a $5 raise, their benefit is really taken out of the same pool as yours. Your potential benefit, not only in the immediate moment, but especially in the long term. Because the employer is going to start to cut corners, and they want to try to get their money back in a different way. Like, if it's a contentious dynamic between you and your boss, he's going to come to resent you, and he's going to fuck you over. Do the bosses of companies fuck people over? Absolutely they do. And the more impersonal and big a corporation is, the more so. But I don't work for a big corporation. I work for basically a man that he owns his whole fucking business, and we're close, and nobody tells him what to do, and I don't get fucked over because we have a mutual relationship where both people value each other. So this whole corporate corruption and structure and exploitation, yeah, it's real, but because these corporations are holding hands with government, and people seem to just be so confused. They think they just hopscotch, jump over from now I'm with government and now I'm with the corporations. You can't decide who your enemy is, it seems. A lot of people are like that, right? Especially young people. They don't even know how they're being exploited and who's doing it. And they definitely don't realize that it's their own fucking friends and family who are hurting them the most in these situations. Because people are missing knowledge of self, really. But, and not to mention, if you make $55 and you get a $5 raise, that's a 9% raise. But if you just got there and you got no skills and you make $18 an hour and you get a $5 raise, same raise, that's a 28% raise. So you actually got 3 times as much money as this other person, even though it's the same dollar amount. It's just little numbers games, you know? And there's this idea of the best standing in solidarity with the worst. And I reject that idea completely. There are just plenty of slackers in the world, not only at minimum wage jobs, but even slacker port workers and electricians. And I'm not that. So why would I want to fight for the same cause as them? It's not the same cause. We both want the highest reward possible, but I only want the highest reward that I earn. I don't want anything that I haven't earned, you know? That's an unpopular opinion. How many people would just pick up something like if you just won the lottery, you take it? Fuck that. It's not. It's not mine. Like I'm not taking people's money. I don't need it, right? Trade unions are a form of government control over the labor force, bottom line. And there's this hierarchy that benefits, of course, the union leaders the most and the common worker the least, actually. So that's the finesse here. But what is their big demand, I mentioned, is automation. What is the big deal with automation? They want to have... So what is this concept that we want to hold business owners hostage and force them to sign over the rights to introduce machines? That's what they're talking about with automation here. They're saying, well, we want job security. We don't want to lose our jobs to machines, right? We're going to have all this technology, and they're going to take our jobs in the future. But so that makes sense, but in principle, is it right? Like, nobody stopped you from buying a washing machine or a dishwasher, and you want some sort of lifetime written agreement that somebody can't automate their docks? Like, why? Are you entitled to that job? Do you own that job? Like, it's some sort of reverse indentured servitude, you know? And yes, I know that machines are destroying human relationships. I know that technology is confusing people. They're disrupting their living processes. I know it's making people weaker and more dependent, inept. It doesn't matter. This is a matter of principle. Because the moment at which, more unpopular viewpoints by me, the moment at which a computer or a robot can do a job as well as you, it's time to get a better job. Like, seriously, that's true. Seriously, I think that. Do we want to pretend like robotic surgery is not better than a surgeon that's been up for 20 hours dealing with patients? Like, we're supposed to, like, is it not better to have a machine that does precise fucking movements? Do we want to go back to humans sewing every piece of clothing by hand? I like stuff sewn by hand. I got a handmade item the other day. Or what about assembling car parts, right? Do we want to take away the assembly lines and make people do that too? Like, if a machine can do a human being's job, then that means that is a job that human beings don't need to be doing anymore in the first place. That's why we have tools. We got tools to drill the holes. It makes things better, okay? Like, it is an abrasive and high friction lifestyle to be living like this in 2024, normally living, and we have tools to not wear our bodies down because we only have, a given amount of life to live. So why would we not want to take care of our health through the use of tools? And I've never bought into this thing of being afraid of AI and machines. Like, it's supposed to be so impressive that AI can write a song in 10 seconds, but the song sucks balls. So what is the content is the question. Like, if it's worthless, there's zero creativity. It can only recycle what human beings created anyway. But if a machine truly can sort through boxes and unload containers, then for God's sakes, move higher up the productive food chain. Like driving the forklift that loads the trucks, right? You could still work at the same dock. I used to drive a forklift at a dock with 120 doors. That's a job that a machine's never going to be able to do. It'll never be automated because of the mind power that is required and how unpredictable it is. It's never going to be automated. So let's just stop pretending like this technology is autonomous. It's not. It's only a tool. The problem with all this technology is that you're going to have it making decisions like whether they let you through to get on a plane or not, like whether they let you buy food or not. It's not the machine that's the problem. It's not the decision making process that's the problem, whether a human makes that decision or a machine makes a decision, like the decision to kill somebody or to not let them buy food. It's just the power to make that decision. That's the problem. So again, it's a red herring. It's not the machines. But you know what? It's only a tool, but so is geoengineering. And tools can be used against you, and that should be taken very seriously. And all the attention should be directed at whoever is behind the tool, who's actually controlling it. So let's get into it now, because as it turned out, the strike actually wasn't that big of a deal. It was short-lived. They already made a temporary deal with the docks until January. All that big talking for nothing. And just like the so-called government shutdowns that they threaten us with every year to pass the federal budget bills, all it does is it plants the seed of fear and uncertainty and puts off the issue into the future, where now this issue can be retrieved anytime that it is needed to become a talking point and to control the people. So it was an important issue, but as it turned out, geoengineering is a better topic. So here we go now. There's a lot of mainstream articles now about geoengineering. I remember it used to be like very taboo to talk about what they're spraying in the skies. And now it's everywhere. It's everywhere now. And all these scientists talking about it, the United Nations, the European Union having meetings about geoengineering and these proposals to implement it. They talk about this and they're going to conflate it now, because what's coming out now is that they're going to start doing geoengineering in order to decrease the temperature to fight climate change. And what is not stated there, but is implied, that this also will address the extreme weather events. So what I'm saying is, crazy weather events happen, the wildfires, right? The hurricanes, the droughts, and we say, hey, geoengineering is involved here. So then people look it up, and geoengineering is really what appears to be solving the issue. It markets itself as addressing the issue, and it actually has caused the issue. It's like an arsonist firefighter, right? I've said that before. So Hurricane Helene, that began September 23rd, off the coast of Nicaragua, moved north into the Gulf of Mexico, became a hurricane on Wednesday, and then in a span of 12 hours, this hurricane went from a Category 2 to a Category 4 right before striking land. And then it continued to move north on land through Florida, but instead of bouncing east back into the Atlantic Ocean the way hurricanes usually do, this storm actually started to move west into Georgia and then settled into the Tennessee, North Carolina area, where it caused catastrophic damage. They've never seen this kind of rainfall, because hurricanes don't just settle in, they bounce to the east. And we haven't seen, of course, major hurricanes behave that way before, and it's due to two things which are becoming normalized, but historically they've never been prominent. So we're hearing this now, these two phrases, but we never used to. Rapid intensification, which means the hurricane was not getting stronger periodically, gradually over time. It was approaching land, and all of a sudden this shit picks up speed, picks up intensity, and becomes way more powerful. Rapid intensification only came about in the last few years that it's being used. And then also as a justification for why it stalled over that area and it really settled in Tennessee and North Carolina, where hurricanes are not known to do that much damage. A stalled front is given as the reason that it didn't move and it was stationary and just continued to spin and do damage and drop rainfall on that area. So now let me be very clear. What am I saying about geoengineering having to do with this hurricane? I'm not saying that it was created by military government operations. I'm saying if there was a way to manipulate the path of a hurricane with geoengineering, it would be done to create maximum chaos, especially on the southern United States. Why? Because they have a history of rebellion. There's an American tradition there. There's a southern hospitality, a way of life where people do not like to give up their rights, and they do not like the idea of joining with the rest of the world into one big happy family. And maybe most importantly of all, in accordance with the United Nations and the global initiatives, the southern United States are going to have to be torn down to be rebuilt in the image of sustainability and interdependence. So the more fear and destruction there is among these most stubborn and old school regions and communities, the most resistant to the progressive new way of living, the easier it's going to be to move an entire nation towards a collectivist future. That's the reason we're saying geoengineering is going on here. And I hear a lot of talk about end times coming, Jesus is coming back. And again, this is why I don't like talking about geoengineering, because it devolves, like people start to act like these people have some kind of biblical demonic powers. These people are not gods. It's a bunch of scrawny, fat little weasel types with money and influence, convincing the order-following types, these thoughtless, restless, grown boys in the military, to fly big aluminum cans into the sky called airplanes, and then press a button that sprays aluminum and sulfur. Like, that's it, basically. That's mostly all that geoengineering is. This is not advanced behavior. This is barbarian behavior. This is caveman stuff. There's nothing sophisticated about this methodology. And I'm going to prove this. But before I do, I want to stay on topic and bring up Dane Whittington's findings specifically to Helene. And here's his video. His website is geoengineeringwatch.org. He did a short video about this.
Was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just the result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NEXRAD network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered? You decide.
And here it shows these flashes from the NEXRAD radar. And here are the actual NEXRAD satellites. And you could see these are real images that he's showing, because those circles, you can match them up and see that the flashes are corresponding with the radar locations. You can see that one in Chicago, that one in St. Louis. And you can see that the flashes, which represent frequency emissions, because that's how radar works, right? When you see something flashing, when you see something on radar, like the weather, it's because they send out a signal and then received it back. That's how radar works. And you can see that it's not every location on the radar that lights up. It's only the ones that are west of the storm. But once then the storm is on land, then there are some flashes to the east. It seems to always almost be surrounding it. In other words, they correlate. They correlate with the path of the hurricane, like traffic cones. Okay? And I went into this as a skeptic. I thought, what do these flashes even mean? Are these real flashes? Is this a real image? What does that have to do with air movement? Well, you take the stalled front into account, the lack of a wind from the west, right where the flashes are. And it's quite convincing. Not necessarily even that this was the cause of the events, but that it was attempted. That's what it shows. It doesn't prove that anything was even done to Hurricane Helene. It's proof that those motherfuckers tried to, at the very least. And that's my sticking point. And I tried to look at some of those NEXRAD maps to see those images for myself, to get that radar image. But you can't get it. You go to ncdcnoaa.gov /NEXRAD. All these radars, unfortunately, their website is down because they happen to have their headquarters in Asheville, North Carolina, where all this damage is. So it's very funny. You do not have access to this. So good on Dane Whittington for, in my view, forcing that. But it's very convenient that these pages go down 404 not found. So I'm limited. On my research, I just found out about these radars this week. NEXRAD is a network of 159 radars in the United States, introduced in 1988. And I'm going to link an article from 1993 in environmenthawaii.org titled "Diluted Measurements Are Used to Give NEXRAD a Clean Bill of Health." So these people back in the 90s, they were seeing this back then, and that impresses me. Reading a bit from the article, the radar signal from NEXRAD will be thousands of times greater than what the current standards allow. However, by using an averaged value for the signal's emissions, NEXRAD's proponents claim that no harm will come from exposure to the beam. So we're talking about a harm from the actual electromagnetic frequency to the people in the area, in the nearby area. Okay, this is the same kind of thing that we're saying now about 5G. Yes, this is that. NEXRAD is a 4th generation weather radar. Here I'll drop this image. Basically, I'm not going to read through all of this, the megawatts and the standards, but there are standards for how much, radiation, radio frequency radiation can be inflicted on human beings. This is way over, of course, that amount. But what they do is, since those flashes are only like fractions of a second, they average, like, say, maybe the minute. So they average the time. And then, the flash happens in 1 millisecond, say millisecond. I don't know the actual time, And then all of the other times, all of the other portions of time where there is no frequency being emitted, but it already was, like an X-ray. It's like averaging the intensity of an X-ray. Like, how strong is the X-ray? Well, I don't know. We're gonna flash your whole body like with radiation and see your bones, but only for 1 second. So if you really think about it, you've really received no radiation, because over the course of your life, it's just one little tiny second that you got it. Well, that's not how poison works. That's not how radiation works. It's about the peak exposure, and this article talks about that. So again, it's just games with numbers, speaking of games. But anyway, that's the NEXRAD radar. So that is Dane Winnington's findings. Dane Winnington is respected in that research field by us. Of course, he's laughed at and ridiculed by the debunkers. He's treated like a flat earther, especially when it comes to the trails coming from airplanes. And that's kind of always the big debate about geoengineering. What is coming out of those damn airplanes? Which I find funny, because there are literally United States government missions on record spraying hurricanes, and then they spray the hurricanes, and then the hurricane turns and moves towards land, literally. Yeah, I'm not bullshitting it. The Florida-Georgia hurricane, 1947, Hurricane 9 or Hurricane King. The cyclone was historically significant in that it was the first tropical cyclone to be modified as part of a multi-year operation called Project Cirrus. In July 1946, General Electric, GE scientists, concluded after experimentation that dry ice seeding could induce heavy rainfall and thus ultimately weaken storms by cooling temperatures in the eye. To undertake Project Cirrus, GE, the United States Army Signal Corps, the Office of Naval Research, and the U.S. Weather Bureau functioned jointly on research and planning. A pair of B-17s and a B-29 of the Hurricane Hunters were dispatched from MacDill Air Force Base. Early on October 13, 1947, 200 pounds of dry ice were dropped throughout the storms, then located about 350 miles east of Jacksonville, Florida. While the appearance of the clouds changed, the initial results of the seeding were inconclusive. Shortly after the seeding took place, the hurricane turned sharply toward the southeastern United States. While the move, the leading GE scientist, Irving Langmuir, later blamed upon the seeding. What a weird thing to do by that guy. We dropped all this dry ice on the hurricane, and then right afterward, it turned toward the United States, where it was moving away from it. What a weird thing to do to connect those two events, right? Subsequent examination of the environment surrounding the storm determined that a large upper level ridge was in fact responsible for the abrupt turn, which imitated that of a hurricane in 1906. So they blamed it on this other hurricane in 1906 that moved similarly, and really this worked. So this is how hurricanes normally move. When they're approaching, they're forming over here. As they get closer to Florida, to the Gulf of Mexico, they're starting to bounce out to the east, and you see that. This is a random year, 1944. You see that some of the ones that are more southerly, they can kind of, they keep moving through west, through Mexico, and that happens as well. But the more it goes to the north, and that I don't want to use the improper terminology here, okay? It gets caught in this kind of force that pushes all the hurricanes east, all right? Debunk that. That's how it works, okay? But this is what happened in 1906. And you can see that the 1906 Florida Keys hurricane they cited, it completely turns around this one that does a loop. It completely turns around, passing through the state of Florida twice, once from the north, once from the south. And there's actually more going on here. These other hurricanes that are forming, it formed in the same area down here near Panama in the Caribbean Sea, and it goes straight to the north. It doesn't bounce to the east. So 1906 is an interesting year with all this, and this is what they reference. In that Florida Keys hurricane they cited, I'm going to read now from a report. Over 200 people died, most of them railway workers. Following the hurricane, all workers of the Florida East Coast Railway were provided with wooden barracks on land, and several additional safety measures were enforced. The hurricane eventually led to the end of commercial production of pineapples in the Florida Keys. In 1947, Project Cirrus attempted to use the method of cloud seeding in a hurricane. Approximately 180 pounds of crushed dry ice were seeded into the 1947 hurricane. We just talked about that. The system was successfully seeded. However, soon after the seeding, the hurricane changed course and traced toward Charleston, South Carolina. Following the seeding, this project was canceled, and numerous lawsuits were filed as the result of the sudden change of the path in the storm. However, the similar path of this hurricane prevented the success of the lawsuits. So they call back on this anomaly, and people bought it. Now, what happened with that hurricane with 1906? I honestly don't know. Can the air pressure differences do this naturally? Can they? I'd say yes. And tornadoes do change directions violently. A few have gone in the opposite direction that they normally go in. But as a general rule, the bigger something is, the more of a mass it is, the less it's going to change direction. And hurricanes do not go from north to south. I would be leaning towards some experimentation being involved here. And this was in 1906, and then in 1908, the Tunguska event happened over there in Siberia. The largest impact event in recorded history. Basically, it was the biggest crash of all time. So I don't know what was going on in that time, the beginning of the 1900s. But in 1965, a similar thing occurred with Hurricane Betsy. And of course, this was during Project Cirrus being officially in effect. There was an uproar at this time with Hurricane Betsy about geoengineering being involved. Because it was 15 years after this whole thing happened again, and you see its path. Again, same thing happens, this kind of 120-degree turn. It just turns suddenly and goes back towards land. It goes back across the Florida Keys, through the Gulf of Mexico, and then hits land and then starts to bounce east, as is natural. Now, this was never admitted to be geoengineered, but this year, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson, he was already talking about geoengineering, like to the people, and the way that it should be implemented because of fossil fuel emissions. Back in 1965, did they know about the effects on the environment then, anything like that? No. It was planned then. It's obvious they are doing this. Again, the climate change narrative has nothing to do with the actual climate events. It's the climate events are largely caused by geoengineering intentionally in order to decrease production in the West. Maybe not as little as pineapple production in the Florida Keys, but it's all about decreasing production. That's why the industrial heart of the nation is going to get hit again and again with disasters. By the way, there was a pipeline explosion in Houston. You're going to see more gas explosions. Book it. It's just like Atlas Shrugged. Read that book. It's going to start happening. It already has. So, decreasing production in the West. That's the point of climate change. Have you noticed that no one is trying to get Asian and Arab nations to reduce their emissions. Somehow it's just not at the top of the list. It's obvious that this is a war against individuality and free production, and that's a lot more compelling than a 1906 hurricane. Because today, wildfires, droughts, floods, hurricanes, then the more sudden turns, more intensification, and it's all blamed on climate change. Of course, not due to geoengineering or nuclear experiments. It's somehow due to us driving and using electricity somehow. There's always a convenient thing to point a finger at, like this 1906 hurricane, and people buy the explanation and then ignore the other 99 arguments in the opposite direction that remain unaddressed. It's like a kid who gets a stupid ass explanation about Santa or about like why mom didn't come home last night. They get a stupid ass explanation, but they're a kid, so that's it. They accept the explanation because, one, the authority figure they see their authority figure as just smarter and more capable and looking out for them. So that's it. That's the end of questions. Because if asking questions is something that comes from a place of confidence, you know? And two, there's just not enough knowledge, right? People just don't have enough knowledge, that kid. And that's us. We're those kids. Which brings me to some of that dilemma now. That dilemma of proving that geoengineering is being done in the face of ridicule by scientists and engineers and all these debunkers whose authority figures, they teach them that the dumb public is to be ridiculed. And sometimes I can't blame them, you know, with the public, with us, with how we act sometimes. But, you know, when you talk proof, here's the thing. Dane Whittington has done amazing lifelong work. Also, I would mention Russ Tanner of globalskywatch.com. Great work, amazing things these men have done. But when we are trying to prove that these things going on, the people, they side with the scientists and engineers because we do not have their level of technical knowledge. That's simple. Now, especially if you're right, you can win a debate with less technical knowledge, but you just can't be wrong. Like you cannot be using things that are going to be broken down and debunked. It's like anything you say can and will be used against you. But regular people like us are just going to quote and share something that Dane Whittington says without understanding the scientific process behind it and without actually engaging with the field of knowledge to be able to explain it to someone who knows what they're talking about. That's the problem. Like the alternative community, like the people who see the conspiracy angle, they see the rulership doing what they're doing and the direction that they're going. They don't speak the same language as the engineers. So these like smart, talented people are completely separated from us. So we lose this on geoengineering. Now with vaccines, we've done a lot better. With fluoride, we've essentially won the debate. But with geoengineering, here's the problem. So the decision makers of this world, they hijack natural processes. It's just like AI can only do things that humans have already done and combine them and do them in different combinations. The people that are in government and administration, they can only repeat and mimic what nature does. So their methods, like aerosol spray coming from the engines, their methods are based on natural processes that they've observed. Natural processes like condensation trails. So for example, there's this video with the spray that, you know, looks like that there are those trails, and they're coming from the tips of the wings on the sides. And of course it was pointed out that was a fuel dump. That that's where the nozzles are for the fuel. So if an airplane has to drop fuel, that's where it's going to come out. And then it comes out that it was like an emergency situation and they had to dump that fuel. Okay, so the chemtrail people got debunked again. What else is new? Well, the thing about that and the fuel dump though is that's exactly what geoengineering would be. Like a fuel dump. Like what is a fuel dump? It would just be a fuel dump with aluminum or other chemicals mixed in with the fuel. So either way, there's always going to be a plausible explanation. Like we're never going to win that. And I actually went on metabunk.org. I went on the debunkers. I went to the layer of the debunkers. Yes, I'm aware that most of these people are de facto government operatives. If not directly by their salary, then they are by their quasi-religious ideological dedication to these institutions and this scientific hierarchy. It doesn't matter. Like, if they're making a scientific claim, I better be able to counter it. So I'm seeing what's going on. And here they're debunking this claim, which has become kind of a fundamental part of our narrative. You know, the people that are trying to prove that airplane trails are sprays and not condensation trails. And this claim is the claim that these modern high bypass turbofan jet engines, the modern jet engine, does not make contrails. And it goes that basically that air, only about 10-15% of the air actually goes through the engine. So all of this air is not going through the engine, and therefore it is not this kind of engine that has changed temperature and the pressure has changed, and then it's leaving these ice crystals which are supposed to be the trail. And the problem is, the problem is, even though it is obvious that what we're seeing in the sky is a particulate aerosol spray, and it's admitted in government documents, still it can be plausibly denied, because technically this can make a trail based on what is accepted by generally to be the mechanics of air pressure. Is the air pressure what is scientifically accepted? Is it that air pressure? Is it that temperature? Is it that amount of fuel? If we're operating with those numbers, then these people are right. It can be plausibly denied. And if it couldn't be debunked somehow, it wouldn't be being done. Like, it's a very simple way that these people operate who are doing geoengineering. And in this case, we're never going to be able to prove that the contrails are actually chemtrails until we actually find the fucking stuff inside the planes, okay? Or the documents, at least. And that is because the mechanism of spraying the atmosphere is the same mechanism as what creates clouds. Again, it's mimicking natural mechanisms. Here's a cloud. In meteorology, a cloud is an aerosol consisting of a visible mass of miniature liquid droplets, frozen crystals, or other particles suspended in the atmosphere. Okay? So, is that not what a chemtrail is? Right? It's just it is an artificial cloud. So why are we trying to prove? I don't get it. Why are we trying to prove that it's impossible for a plane to leave a condensation trail if we can't actually prove that it's impossible? Where we can prove that it's being done, spraying sulfur to reflect the sun is openly talked about. We have record of them spraying hurricanes and them changing directions. We have United Nations documents talking about how there are going to be more extreme weather events coming in the next few years. There's all this information, and we have way too many targets to hit for us to be shooting blanks. So we cannot be wrong. We cannot use arguments that are going to be fucking microanalyzed under a microscope, pulling on 1,000 strings, and then, we totally get away from the heart of the conversation. But because of our narrative, which is the predicament of being someone who's trying to prove something that is obvious exists, where we try to prove that this thing exists, but it's obvious that it exists. And because that is it drives you to insanity, that predicament, because it's so obvious, especially when, health is involved. We're thinking about human life here. Being in that predicament, we latch on to every little thing that indicates that what we're saying is true. So we grab onto everything that is like, aha, and that proves it. See, it is true. We do that instead of being patient, when there are different points that we should be focusing on, like this: there will never be a square pattern in a sky that is not man-made. You're not going to get square patterns. So when we see this and this part of the cloud is cut off, that's the smoking gun right there. Then you see other images of like a cymatic type wave-like pattern that indicates that a frequency pulse is moving the cloud formation, right? These straight lines, these ridges, right? These square, sharp lines, straight lines, not natural. And now it actually doesn't matter though, because the narrative is already shifting from engineering. Geoengineering doesn't exist. Now the narrative is already changing before our eyes. It's geoengineering exists and it's necessary because of climate change. And the bottom line answer to that is no one owns the earth. So the government is not to be trusted with taking care of environments. They can't take care of themselves. Like literally, they can't take care of themselves. Like you pay them. They can't work. They cannot survive without you. They're a parasite, a leech. It's a mental parasite that grows to hate the host. It hates you for the trust and nourishment, the trust you put in them and the nourishment you give them. That's how it goes with somebody who hates themselves. Global government is an inherently self-loathing ideology. And basically, here's how it goes. Like, something goes wrong in your house, your power goes out, right? And you look outside your window, and there's somebody right outside your house, right kind of where your electrical panel is supposed to be, right where your power lines are supposed to be. Somebody who's not usually there. Do you have to wait for proof that they cause your power to go out? Like, do you have to... They'll be able to deny it, like you didn't catch them red-handed, but... You see what's going on here. You see that something's off. You know in your being this is an issue. You have the right to address the person. You address that person directly because it affects your living space. It's like I talk about, okay, my body is my property. So say I'm outside, not my property, only my body is my property. And somebody's like clapping their hands 2 inches in front of your face. Can they do that? They can't. It's affecting your living space, even though that air in front of my face is not directly my property. I have no direct claim to that property. Basically, these people are not to be trusted. These people have always betrayed us, right? I'm talking about government. Government has always betrayed us, and they've destroyed systems, they've destroyed ideas, they've destroyed people, families, environments, the earth, and basically, why should we trust them? And that's my bottom line about geoengineering. That's my sticking point. Now I'm going to get to the end of this episode and end it with making connections. I want to connect everything. So, hurricane season. Hurricane Milton is next. The storm is forming in the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to slice across Florida, and I'm expecting a few more hurricanes before the end of the year. Are we going to be able to convince people that they're geoengineered? Probably not. But because this isn't even a scientific debate, it's psychological. This is a psychological debate. Think about how hard it is to convince somebody that they're in an abusive relationship. This is exactly the situation humanity's in. We see societal authorities as our parental figures. So almost everyone in the world generally sees authority as generally being good for some reason. So even the people that are saying the politicians are corrupt, the CEOs are greedy, my boss is an asshole. Yeah, this is like saying, yeah, my dad is a different person when he drinks. Or saying some shit like, he's a good man except for when he gets angry. And that this is a grave error, because it is an attempt to evaluate people based on your presumption of their intention, as opposed to evaluating them based on their actions and their behavior. And again, people fuck themselves up with their emotions, so ascribing beneficent, good-natured emotions to people who do not behave in a way that is synchronous with those emotions. Unerringly, authority shows itself to be controlling, psychopathic, sadistic, genocidal, and I don't see us talking about the mental and emotional cross-wiring that prevents people from seeing this world that they're living in. Like geoengineering, nature represents the mother, right? So then mankind with his tools and his laboratories and his vehicles represents the father. So to admit that our parents are abusive and that they want our stagnation and not our progress, if we take that metaphor, that it's not a metaphor, it's how things work, that would require a mental rewiring of the abuse cycle, right? The cycle that drags us from between neglect and then reconciliation, love bombing. And that mental rewiring does not happen without being accompanied by an intense emotions like grief, betrayal, fear, depression. You have to go through that in order for your mental functioning to see that what was happening to you was wrong. It's like you have to relive the trauma. Unfortunately, this is how it works, and this is what shadow work is supposed to be. It's all just about facing suppressed pain. And this is why people don't get it. It's not what comes out of the jet engine. I get the jets are cool. Okay, I know the jets are cool. Okay, can you think about life? Can we think about the course of life and the connections between all aspects of life that make things go the way they go? Well, we're so reductionist, like there's such a separation worldview. So you're gonna look at the jet engines and say, no, that's not actually coming out of the jet engine. Anyway, that's the mud show that is geoengineering in that conversation. Now strikes now. So what about strikes? The supply chain, the economy. Well, money represents nourishment. So again, it's the mother. And again, we have an abuse cycle. It's the boom-bust economic cycle. The way our currency is debt-based. It's a debt-based currency. Again, this would be like the mother who only gives you affection on rare occasions. And then you spend the rest of your day worrying about when she's going to abandon you. Like, when is she going to leave you again? So that's inflation, right? Inflation. There's less love. Will the market crash? Are the gas prices going to go up? It's literally like a parent that is neglecting the child for someone else. And children like that, how do they grow up to be? They grow up to have attachment issues, insecurity, always worrying that the love is going to run out or that their partner will leave them. It's the same way with money. That's why we don't make money. That's why we can't hold on to it. It's the reason complex PTSD, children of parents that basically, I'm not just saying abused them or neglected them, like just didn't raise them in an emotionally healthy way, which is most people. This is why people like that struggle to form relationships, and they tend to push love away. They don't want to, but they do, because this is the mental wiring. The wires are crossed again. So you're associating a relationship with abandonment, with neglect, with all of these toxic things, all of these loaded things. That's why we don't make money. We think we want money. We try hard to make money, but we push it away. Right? Because we would be wealthy if we were truly secure and loved ourselves. We wouldn't throw the money away, and we wouldn't throw our time away, throwing it away on people that don't matter, and we wouldn't be paying taxes. Big thing, big important thing. And remember, with money is not a measure of natural resources. Money is a measure of human values. It's about what we value. Again, it's not the gold that makes the wealth. It's not the Bitcoin that makes somebody rich. It's because people, us, we're living according to the language and the terms of those that we see as authority figures. Again, it's our parents. So it's all about relationships with human beings. This is the reason we have a total wealth imbalance, is because we have a relationship imbalance with our relationship to these people. We do see them as gods who have supernatural powers. Just because they can talk smooth, and these motherfuckers can do equations, and they can do these things, and they can fool a bunch of people into feeling an emotion and go to the polls. This is what it is. We need to connect with people first. Like, we need to face our faults, we need to face our insecurities, and then having done that work on us, then we can not only give people valuable information, as I hope I've done here today, we can make them feel differently about themselves and the world they live in through our demeanor, as I hope I've done today. We need to make people feel differently about life through the way we act and the way we treat them. That's the solution. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.